Banks valuation rests at Nairobi Security Exchange. Share price fall pushes KCB to 5th most valuable bank. Investors seen reacting to banks' defaults battle. And these are the smiling faces right now. Top 5 banks value in billion shillings. James Mwangi, Equity Group MD and CEO. Equity 139.63 billion shillings. We have Cooperative Bank following closely there with 68.06 billion shillings, headed by Gideon Muriuki. Then we have John Gashora, NCBA Group MD and CEO. There we have 65.24 billion shillings. ABSA 65.1 billion shillings. And we have KCB 64.43 billion shillings. In terms of asset value, of course, KCB was leading there. And you can follow this story inside the Business Daily on page 3. Right, ABSA, NCBA, they topple KCB in banks valuation race at Nairobi Security Exchange. They make supernormal profits in this country. Bill Okero, I know, before you even sit down, right? I wonder what you will say about this latest toppling over of NCBA and ABSA.
Yeah, I think the KCB has been the largest in the region and has expanded significantly in the past 10-15 years. But I think lately their performance has not been very good. It's become a government bank. Back to
I thought it's a quasi bank, or is it a fully bank?
Now it's
a quasi government.
It was, but now it's become a government bank. But again, otherwise, the banking sector has always performed very well, even in the worst of the economic situation in this country. And largely, it's one of the things I have always argued against is that the government seems to have focused more on supporting banks, make these billions, than looking at getting the banks to support the economy. Because if the government would have come up with regulations that would encourage banks to fund productive sectors of the economy, to take risks in agriculture, to take risks in SMEs, but what we have seen is the banks, the central bank, particularly the regulator, has always been focused more on regulatory aspect, on ensuring that the banks are making money. For example, we have seen in the last 3 years the issue of the forex. The spread between what the central bank gives us the official and what the banks are buying at, and the banks have been making crazy money on that. But I think it's time the government really got the banks to fund, to take risks in this economy, and put money in agriculture, put money in SMEs, put money in manufacturing, and because otherwise we'll always be having a situation where the banks are making supernormal profits, and all the blue chips companies, announcing profit warnings, and other small SMEs all collapsing, indeed, one after the other. And the level of non-performance. So central banks and government just being concerned about non-performing loans, they see that as an indication that the banks are, the businesses are not doing well. So I think it's really unfortunate that and this is what drives the growth in GDP, which you always see. What I always call the elitist aspects of the economy. There's financial sector, that, for example, ICT. These are the things which you find growth of 5%, 6% in the economy, even in the worst of times. Yet Kenyans are struggling, businesses are collapsing, jobs are not there. But those figures always coming from performance, particularly in this sector and other similar sectors that seem to enjoy government support. Banks, how they get supported by government. If you have liquidity problems, central bank finances gives you liquidity. I mean, they get a lot of support.
These are the good cushioning for them.
Any risk that comes in, for example, when you remember MPs came up with that interest rate, everything that they seem is a risk, government will support banks. And so the banks cannot make losses really unless there is some crooked activity.
But of course, the symbiotic relationship between the banks and government, where the banks will go and get the bonds in the bond markets, so they really survive. So they know that
by the way, the last particularly 2-3 years, the bond market has helped them. They make that's the only other place they make money.
Invest there.
They're the main lenders.
Invest in good
government. Why do you lend to the BAL and to a professor here when they are risky and there is you can get a premium on the government and the lending rate of 15, 16, 18 now,
18 and risk free.
Risk free, 18%.
This
is madness. It's madness.
So, yeah.
I think the way my colleague answered that question, he did it so well that I suspect you had given him some leakage. But I think if I can respond to the same.
Yes.
If you look at the photo in the front page,
yes,
the impression is that the most important driver of bank performance is the CEO.
Is the CEO.
Because instead of putting the face of the CEO, they should have put probably the logos of the banks. Because the way they put it is that if the CEO is not performing well, the bank is not performing well. But more substantively, it also indicates that at the end of the day, it is the leadership that has an effect on the performance of the bank. Number two, and this is what impresses me, if you look at these top 5 banks, about 4 of them are indigenous banks, except ABSA. And Kenya's banking system, despite the support from the bank, as he puts it, is one of the bright sectors. It has done very well compared with other sectors. It has even gone global. It has even gone to the neighboring countries and done very well. And that's important because the banks are very good, the performance of the banks are a very good indicator of how the economy is performing. But the question is, who do banks exist for? Is it for the shareholders or also for the ordinary person? So banks should exist, as you put it, to make sure that there's intermediation. So the people who save and the people who lend are able to connect each other more easily. But now, a lot of people don't benefit from the banking sector. So I support him.
So will that be a good indicator of how the economy is performing? If you say that the banks are flourishing and the people that are meant to be assisted by the banks are not.
That's exactly the argument. Yeah. That at the end of the day, the bank should be doing well, but the economy should also be doing very well. Because the money they use...
So that is a false indicator. It's just like what you normally argue here regarding the GDP and the economy, that here we have the growth of the GDP, but still there's no pesa.
But that's exactly what we are saying, that the banks have not yet done what they're supposed to do. Because that money they are making as banks should also be reflected in other sectors of the economy. Because we should be borrowing that money, investing, expanding our business.
At a lower interest rate.
And lower interest rates, and everybody should be feeling the effect. But now they are doing very well, but the rest of us are watching them doing very well. And that should not be the purpose of banks.
Could also perception be playing also into this? Recently we saw Gideon Muruki as well, when we're talking about how he's earning an eye-popping figure as far as the CEOs are concerned, especially from the banks. I think he's a lead in this particular phases that we're given here. He's the one who's taking most as far as Corp Bank is concerned. Does that play into perception into the market as far as this is concerned?
I think and I agree with Bill. Good to see you, Bill. Bill, good to see you.
Yes.
I saw you the other day very clearly. Was it last week, Friday?
Just keep it to the topic. We'll come to Bill. Let's keep to the lens.
And management is so important. The whole structure of the board. If you look, KCB has gone some. So there's something perhaps explaining that. Second, the banks are just relying on an agent.
No, I was asking you regarding the faces and regarding Gideon Muruki's money.
I'm coming there.
Oh, you're coming there. Oh,
yes. I think I have issues with somebody sticking forever. He has been there forever in the bank.
He's been there forever.
Yeah. It's time you do 10 years. Exit.
For how long has he been there at the helm?
That's why I say forever. I can't remember how long he has been there.
Remember when? Okay.
Yeah. And when you look at more in a business school, after 10 years, we are given a strategy. Move on to the next. But the perception, as you say, I'm not sure cooperative bank is what was supposed to be. Because if you remember Professor Mungai, the late Mungai, he was very clear. What is going to move this country is through cooperatives. It turned to be another animal. But in terms of looking at the faces there, as Exxon is talking about, the CEO has everything to do with what happened in an institution. And that's why my reading is, I'm not sure whether cooperative is second year because of the fella. It's perhaps the whole, I think people think about investing in cooperatives and anything. But the point strongly here, we don't see bank really reflecting what they're making in terms of development. There's a disconnect there.
There's a disconnect.
There's a disconnect.
Okay. All right. Bilokero.
No, I think the CEO, Muriuki, of course, longest serving.
He's the longest serving.
Close to 15 years now. I think he must be.
He's beating James Mwangi to the punch.
He is
Really?
the longest serving. But the bank has grown under his leadership.
So we give it to him.
really grown what was cooperative banks before he came in.
Right.
And today it's you can see it's the second largest on Nairobi Stock Exchange. And then number two, for those banks which are listed on Nairobi Stock Exchange, they have to comply with the corporate governance guidelines of CMA and so forth.
Yeah.
So in terms of whether I think it under the controls of CMA and NSE rules and so forth, and the central bank, I think there's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of checks, and I don't think he would have survived there if he was not doing well, or if he was not up to the mark. But of course, the success is always by the shareholders looked at in terms of the bottom line. If the bank is performing very well and the shareholders are getting a return, they don't really care if it stays as long as there's no law on limiting how long you should be. I think the only law I know in the Banking Act is on your appointment. You have to meet certain criteria and so forth. But in terms of how long you stay, it really depends on your shareholders. If they're happy, then you'll stay. But I hope then the question of the remuneration of the CEO.
Yes.
Really, given the context in which we live as a country, looking at the economy of this country, looking at the population, with nearly half the people struggling to put food on the table, and you have CEOs that are earning close to what some ministries get. It's
and disparity
crazy
between the janitorial pay and the CEO.
Really, it's madness, and so I think yes, there has to be.
But I was reading somewhere that why the reason why we pay the CEOs that much, of course, they get to do they're supposed to do only 5% of the entire work of the organization, which is crucial for the organization. It's only 5%.
But that is the most important.
That's the
providing strategic direction.
Yes, of the company.
And
so that's why
leadership. Yes. That is the most important thing. You might tomorrow remove Muriuki, give somebody else that leadership of that bank, and you find things changing dramatically in a couple of years. So I think leadership is also
very key.
Is important, and probably that's why his board and his shareholders are happy paying him. And this happens in the Western countries. You've seen in America how some of the the CEO packs are crazy.
It's a big debate.
And it became a big issue in 2008 when the financial sector collapsed. And so, but I think there's need for somebody like Muriuki, who is running the cooperative sector, which is a very important sector in this country because of the cooperative societies, that the bank is helping facilitate the growth of that sector. It's important. I'm not very good on cooperatives, but I don't think SACCOs are doing as well as they did in the 70s and 80s, and when they were really well, it was everything. But I think it's important that this being their bank, and this is the only sector with its own bank. All the others have not done well. Agriculture, many other sectors have tried to set up. Even counties have tried to set up a bank. It's not. This is the one sector, cooperative bank, which I mean, the connotation is there that it's about the SACCOs. So
that was the drive. You're right.
Yes.
Even the university in Karen was actually established on that, the cooperative university, and it came from how we ventured in cooperatives. I do recall when I was growing coffee, we were going through because of cooperatives. The whole model came from the Nordic countries, and the whole idea was, can we have actually, until perhaps 10 years ago or for whatever, we never had a degree in cooperatives. I think that was a picture at Karen. The idea was, how do we leverage on the Harabi spirit, if you wish, people coming together.
With the cooperative university there.
Yeah, and the whole thing was, even the bank itself, we have a bank for cooperatives. So there was a whole chain there which will link to that.
Okay, could we also talk maybe about NCBA, the merger and acquisition, Commercial Bank of Africa?
I'm conflicted
and
because that's my bank.
It's your bank.
I bank in NCBA, I'm conflicted.
All right. Do you think that it really worked, of course, that particular merger for it to be in the third place where it is on that particular tier of the top banks?
I don't have an account in NCBA, so I can comment on that. But that does not that does not stop me from being objective. Maybe as an account there.
He's biased.
But if you remember the background to this merger, there was this move by the regulators to raise the capital of banks. And that's probably that probably informed the merger of the two banks. And you can see that merger has made them one of the big banks in Kenya. They probably can do more. They are benefiting from economies of scale. And I believe that if you are big banks, they can compete globally. I'm seeing examples of Nigerian banks coming and buying our banks, so they can have footprint in this country. So if you are bigger banks, they can also have footprints across the world, like all the big banks we talk about. My own concern is whether we are taking care of our indigenous market. Which banks, for example, take care of the farmers, take care of the livestock farmers, subsistence farmers. So we need to have various types of banks to take care of specific needs of the country. And the last example I can give is the China Exim Import Bank and so on. Those banks that have been funding big infrastructures in this country. So we need our banks to be big enough so that they can also fund big infrastructures, big projects in other parts of the world. But I think big banks are always good in the long run.
Right.
It has been the policy of the government for a long time now to encourage mergers in the financial sector. There was a time when Kenya had the largest number of banks probably in Africa, running into 70 plus banks in the late 1990s. And after that, the government, I think, has been pushing by increasing the capital and encouraging banks to merge. And I think NCPA has done pretty well in the last few years, and it's very professionally run bank, and it has a strong economically powerful families that are behind the bank.
Yes.
And that's why the focus has always been on the corporate sector, mostly, and so they've done I think well, notwithstanding the many criticisms we gave when in the past administration we thought they were enjoying some sort of leverage, but they have done pretty well.
They've done pretty well because of the monopoly of Fuliza.
That's what I meant. Yes.
You're just talking very fatiguely around it.
Yes.
Okay. So we see also Absa Bank and the morphing of Barclays Bank into Absa Bank, the rebranding. You think it's worked for it as it is right now, and also the new leadership in Absa with Abdi Mohammed, who also has a storied history with the bank. I think he's been there for the longest, almost clocking to 30 years at Absa.
Yeah, Absa is being, when we grew up, it was Barclays that everyone knew.
That's what we remember.
Yes, but I think there was a time when they went down, actually, when they shut down the branches all over the country, and they became a bit of an elitist bank for only the corporate sector in Nairobi and a few places. But I think that policy changed, and in the last few years they've been expanding.
That policy changed with the Equity Bank. Now the really changes.
Yes. And so they're doing well now.
Actually, the Equity Bank saw the opportunity when Barclays closed the rural areas.
Correct.
Equity saw the opportunity. And that's how they came in.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
but they still have that image. These are not the people's banks.
Kind of,
That they
you cannot shake it off.
Corporate and so forth, and it's not for ordinary guys to expect credit from.
But it's also interesting because
Equity also with their campaign. Are you a member? That was the are you a member?
But it's also interesting.
And interesting because there used to be those memes also with dogs. In the banking hall, they're relaxing there and they're asking, "Are you a member?"
But it's also interesting because we did not think that the name change from Barclays to Absa would have such a big impact, because Barclays was very well known.
Indeed.
They disinvested from Africa and then left Absa. But they have surprisingly done very well. So this would be a very good case study of how a name change and a change of strategy.
The branding, yes. Yeah, the branding can adversely affect.
Yes, it would be an interesting case to find out exactly what they did to be where they are today. But at the end of the day,
they also spend so much in terms of the branding, the marketing, to just make sure they keep Africanacity, tagline. And you can
what does ABSA mean actually? Is it an abbreviation or it's just ABSA?
Amalgamated Bank of South Africa. And they are very quiet on that.
They're very quiet
exactly. On that. Yes.
Exactly. If you unpack it, you see Kenya's behaving in a different way.
That's very true.
They're a bit muted on that.
Yeah, very muted.
It's very strategic.
Because other South African brands have not been doing very well in Kenya. So you
Nah, not in that.
But Stanbic is a South Africa.
that have many pono in South Africa. But the other ones that have tried to come later have not done very well. So maybe that's why they have been muted about their domicile or their home.
Okay. All right. Let's look finally at Paul Russo taking at the head from Joshua Igara as well as the CEO. And in terms of asset value, no one can take it away from KCB. So how come they've been pushed to the fourth tier there on this?
But the chairman also changed.
Oh yeah.
And I think my brother was
so
coming
Joseph
from
Kinyua
there
became
on.
the chairman as well.
The chairman of the bank changed.
The chairman, previously, who was
Andrew Cairo.
Cairo, yeah.
A renowned banker, Citibank.
And he picked from
Central Bank.
Charles Munene as well.
Sorry?
Before there was Charles, I can't remember his name, the other name. Yeah, but we can talk about the changes of at the helm, the chairman and the CEO.
Because Andrew Cairo was in London for a long time for Ghana, Central Bank. And therefore, banking sector was in it. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. When you go to institutions which make decision, not going over there, let's have a meeting to make a decision, you see a difference. Perhaps, as Bill is pointing out, the CEO and the chair of the board, they have so much of the direction the institution takes. And if you get a typical government bureaucrat, which Kenya was, and I respect him for that, as the chair of the board, then there are things you have to look and see whether that's, and no wonder you're seeing KCB pass get into the fifth position. Because the chair of the board has a lot to do with that institution. And then I think this gentleman, what's his name again, the CEO?
Russo.
Paul Russo.
Look at it, it's more like here in marketing or something like that. I'm not quite sure his background is.
No, but he was a former CEO of National Bank. Yeah, when now KCB also acquired National Bank, he was the CEO. Then now he transited.
Yeah, and National Bank was here, not there. It was just a conveyor belt. And anything else. It was waiting. It was waiting for things from government.
I think the ball you have to allow me to protect my client, because Russo was my student. And,
Russo was a student.
But I will not disclose his other details. Confidentiality clause, I must quote it.
Yeah, has to be yourself.
Yeah, we are not going to disclose. If you're not disclosing the other's backgrounds, why him? Must protect him.
All right, but you wanted to say something on that regard as well.
So I think the question raised was about the board. And I think one of the ways to change the direction of an organization is to change the board, because the board oversees the organization. So maybe the change in the board of KCB is being reflected by this capitalization. And maybe what we should do is open up the boards of all these banks and look at them. So who are the members of the boards? Do they have the prerequisite knowledge and background to steer banks to where they are? So the performance of these banks is affected by very many factors: the board, the environment, the history, the government, and so on. So maybe we cannot make a conclusion just based on this.
On this, indeed.
Yeah.
And then the change of leadership from Charles Mushene to Andrew,
and then Kenya now.
And now we have Kenya as well. Could we also talk about the expansion of KCB to Rwanda? Has also this affected in any way the capitalization of it? That maybe they did?
First, I want to. There's nothing to hide. When you look at the 5 gentlemen who are running the 5 largest banks, I must say, I'm happy that at least 2 of the 2 gentlemen.
I know where you're headed.
You know where I'm headed. Russo comes from Marsabit, one of those places where you would not imagine that somebody from there would be at the helm of the largest bank in the country. And so, but let me say this.
But he is very keen on what
where the others come from.
And the other 3, you know where they come from. But it's good to be on the high table. But let me say this. I think the banks, Nairobi, if you are a bank quoted on NSE,
yes,
the valuation keeps changing based on a number of factors, particularly on the sentiments of the market. And people look at if, for example, even the dividend policy can impact on the market value. The non-performing loans, the balance sheet itself, can impact, which may not, because of the bank's lending policy. KCB, as you know, it's one of the largest lenders to government institutions and to SMEs. So if, for example, their default or their non-performing loans is higher or increases, then on the market, that impacts on the market value because the share price go down. So, but there's no doubt that I think it's really gone. It has grown phenomenally in the last few years. I mean, it's all over. It's gone all the way. Both Equity and the KCB have done pretty well in the region, and I think they still have that policy to continue expanding all the way in the large Eastern Central Africa. Yeah.
All right, let's welcome Dr. McPhee as well. Good to see you, Dr. McPhee. I was a bit worried that you're normally on time.
Well,
so I was texting. I thought maybe that you slept through the alarm.
No, what happened was I came here at 6. I went downstairs.
At 6? You've been waiting there since 6?
No, so then I asked someone. I said, where's the bar? And he must be in I&M building. So I drove to I&M.
Oh my goodness!
I went up to the 15th, 16th floor, whatever it is. Where's the bar? Oh, he's now on the Mombasa Road. So I came back here.
Are you serious?
Because at one point I was saying Sacha wacha tu sasa pumzika. But anyway, just as XN is protecting...
I'm really sorry about that.
But anyway,
the miscommunication that has happened.
Well, I looked around here and I didn't see anyone there, and I said, okay, now Duval is obviously somewhere else. So I asked someone, he must be in the I&M. Anyway, these things happen, as they say.
I'm sorry about that.
A certain word happens, but I won't use that word on TV. But just as you're supporting your past student, Russo, and I think Russo's a very, very clever man, but I also have to support my past student, James Wangi. Now the position here, what you're saying is absolutely correct. If you have a dividend policy, which is going to have huge dividends, what happens is, the share price will inevitably go up. And, you've got to remember that James Mwangi is one of the cleverest people, not only in Kenya, in the world, I would say. He has been selected by Ernst & Young as the entrepreneur of the year on a worldwide basis. So, he's a very, very clever man. For example, when they were the first, Equity was the first to put in a big banking system. And, James Mwangi was up at the Methodist Guest House, with his team until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and when that came on stream, it worked perfectly. That didn't happen with KCB. It didn't happen with previously the forerunner of NCBA. They had a major crisis. They chose the very wrong day to go live with their computer system. Now, Equity has gone to the DRC. They were starting to do really well. James Mwangi, he's a hands-on man. He went to the DRC. They bought one of the banks that had been there for many years, and the DRC is incredibly profitable to them. So it's what you were saying, Billa. So in this case here, you have a higher profit. What will happen? Your market value increases. It's as simple as that. And which is the most profitable bank? I was talking to one of the directors. I won't mention her name because she's no longer a director of KCB. But it was about, could it be a year ago or 2 years ago? And I was saying, look, the profit of Equity is going to be higher than KCB. She was saying, no, this is the thing. But let's face it, the profit, Equity is now the most profitable bank in Kenya. And if it's the most profitable bank, it will have the highest market value. It's as simple as that, And I'm saying all of this actually because I want to go and get a lot of money from Equity for a special project of mine. But that's to try to put Kenya in the limelight, But that's another story,
All right, but before we just move away from the banks as well, will be good to talk about the sustainability report where everyone now is gravitating towards environment, social and governance. as it is. And we must give it to KCB when it comes to green sustainability and some of the products that they have been doing there as well. Looking at the sustainability report, I think Banks, the pace that was set there by Joshua Igara and picked up by Paul Russo right now, it must be commended. Because everyone is gravitating towards that, and then also sustainability financing to MSEs. That Bill Okero, you're saying the government has not, or no, the banks have not been really doing well in terms of supporting them. But even ABSA, I think they've set aside 100 billion shillings now for their SMEs. But let's talk about just sustainability financing that these banks are gravitating towards too.
Well, you know, can I mention,
sure.
I'm jumping in actually and taking over here. This is a coup d'etat.
You are my senior.
takeover.
You are my senior. Go ahead.
Okay, well, you know, the first thing is, I think it's always very important to keep in mind, as Martin O'Cheng, he's, at the moment actually, he's going around the tea customers in the UK and Europe. He's the managing director of Cecini, okay, and he's gone into this thing of sustainability in a very, very big way. Now, you see, I think the important thing here to keep in mind is that sustainability reporting, it's, I was downloading something yesterday because I have a student who's doing a study on environmental, sustainability reporting on the NSE. And, you know, it's a little bit unfortunate that the NSE PLC itself is not actually leading the way there. Because, you know, you look at the sustainability report, the first one that came out was Safaricom, and then KCB, a number of people on the board said, look, let's get into this thing of sustainability reporting, and they do it well. But the point that Martin O'Cheng makes is, you know, one thing is to report on your environmental, social and governance matters.
Yes.
But the other thing is to actually practice it in the company.
It's not just reporting.
You know, exactly.
And
you see, the thing is, how can a bank actually be more, you know, involved in this ESG process? You know, and they talk about integrated thinking now.
Yes.
And the answer, of course, is, you know, they've got to look at their use of water, their use of paper, their use of, you know, do you have lights on needlessly, or you're using electricity power where, you know, although we have surplus power available in Kenya, and, you know, we don't use it enough, but the only thing is to try to use it as well as we can. So, and Martin O'Cheng says, look, you know, you go down to some of these people who will tell you all about reporting, but they don't actually have any practice of sustainability in their organization.
Yes.
And so, and, you know, I find that, well, a little point, you know, I very often in Strathmore, I'm in the cafeteria there, people go and wash their hands and they pull 1, 2, 3 sheets of paper. Now, why is that sheet of paper that size? Well, probably because you can use one of them to actually dry your hands. But no, the average Kenyan will take 1, 2, 3. You go along the expressway.
It's true, by the way.
You go along now. You know that is trees. Okay, that's
Indeed.
You know, but it's a very small thing. Petrol is 213 shillings and 90 cents. Okay, it can be a little bit more or less. Where I buy it, it's less. Okay, it's not Magendo, but where I buy it.
I need to know where it is.
Well, it's on Lanana Road actually. Astral Lanana Road. I buy my petrol at 4 shillings less than everyone else in Nairobi, okay? But anyway.
And this is not adulterated.
No, it's not adulterated either. It's a past Strathmore student actually who was running the place, so I know them well. So, but anyway, now you go on the expressway. You're meant to go at you know, 80 kilometers per hour. You have people traveling on that expressway doing, well, 120, whatever.
This morning, somebody was doing almost at 130. I was doing 80, and I was like, oh man, you are packed.
Well, this is it.
Yeah.
Now, what's the problem with that? The problem is we're using more power, and you've got to have your foot. You're using more fuel in order to go from A to B.
Indeed.
And so now you see, what's the problem?
When you're speeding.
The problem is the single biggest item on our import bill is petroleum. So we've got to all use it less. I try to travel less in my car so that, because we have to reduce our import bill. We have to do it by living within our means. And we're not doing that. I was on TV once and I said, well, you got a Prado, haven't you? At the end of the show, he said to me, how do you know I've got a Prado? I said, well, you're an average Kenyan, an average Kenyan sitting in here, all of these gentlemen, this gentleman has a Mercedes, this man has a Jeep, and yours is a Prado.
Have a Vitz.
So we're living beyond our, and you see the problem is we have a dual economy in Kenya. You've got the 1 inchie in the countryside.
Thank you.
Now they, are down here. Now I'm a subsistence farmer. I get, for example, my kidneys fail. I have to die because I cannot afford to go to a hospital in Kenya.
I think
Right.
So, but anyway, it's sorry that we're talking about sustainability, but don't forget we want to try to sustain.
we will come to that.
I thought I passed my senior.
It was then with
I
Bill.
passed
Okay.
my senior, but I really want to. And good to see you, McPhee, after a long time in the meeting we had last week or the other week.
Yeah.
The point is, we need to go beyond reports.
Correct.
We are extremely good in this country.
Absolutely.
Reports, this after this, but they implement it, even if you can improve 30%. And I'm looking at banks and relating to sustainability and the issue of financing, the whole thing of ESG. And can banks stay, because they're on one pillar of lending only. And that's all they do. They can go, if we want products which are friendly to the climate, can we invest in that research and development? As you say, products like maybe how we dispose things. And by the way, Joe and Joey, and I suppose you guys know Joe and Joey, he told me the maximum you should pick are 2 when you're washing your hands. Don't go beyond 2.
Indeed.
And that will do it. And I've religiously done that. So there's that importance of banks investing in environmental. How many banks have stepped out and say, we are going to invest this much to go to plant trees? To me, the reports are great, but the bigger job about it is turning those reports into action. And not just the bank, everybody. Let's put that.
All right.
And there are countries, you've traveled out there, you see how they have really taken in terms of beyond the report.